Remember that story I shared in so many details about Generoso? Yes, that same one, the man who, with patience and skill, taught me to shift gears in a completely different way last week. I'm sure you'll enjoy remembering this story. To refresh your memory, I'm that blonde fascinated by the grandeur of nature, the same one who, sometime after saying goodbye to Albert, ended up meeting Richard. And guess what? She still kept me trapped, with no room to decide for myself. Not even when Richard tried to talk to her. His words seemed to have any effect. It was as if his presence was an invisible but at the same time insurmountable obstacle. Ever since that special day, when Generoso showed me the secrets of the gears, Richard began to approach me in a way that went beyond simple casual gestures. There was something about him that conveyed security, complicity, as if he knew exactly what I needed without me having to say a single word. He became a great friend, a silent confidant, someone who seemed to understand my concerns. But our communication happened at specific times. I only talked to him when Natalie left for work. Deep down, I think she knew that Richard cared for me in a way that went beyond the conventional, with that discreet but always present affection. Every morning, he made a point of asking me about laws and traffic, trying to help me improve my knowledge, but perhaps also wanting to divert our conversations to something less dangerous, less obvious. The weeks went by, and then came that unexpected news. Natalie announced that she would need to work an extra job on the weekend to increase her income as a waitress. As soon as those words left her mouth, I felt something inside me vibrate. My eyes shone with happiness. A whole weekend. A moment just for me. For me and Richard. I tried to hide my excitement, but inside, a whirlwind of feelings overwhelmed me. It was the perfect opportunity to get closer to him, to experience something different, maybe watch a movie together or even go out to learn more about traffic. Any excuse to spend more time with him. As the week went on, my anxiety grew. My gaze met his with a silent intensity, but always within the limits of respect. But did he feel the same? Did he notice the energy that hung in the air? Meanwhile, Natalie seemed to be starting to notice something. Maybe a hunch, an instinct that something was happening around her, something she couldn't define, but that seemed to bother her intuition. The days followed their routine. Richard left for work at the same times as her, and our interactions were limited to those small moments. The mornings, when he had coffee, and the evenings, when we all had dinner together. But every look exchanged, every word said or kept silent, carried with it an intensity that only the two of us seemed to understand. And so, the weekend approached. Friday arrived and, to my great joy, Richard had left work early. When he opened the door to my house, I saw that he was smiling, carrying with him that light-hearted air of someone who was already having a peaceful time. He took off his shoes at the entrance, ran his hand through his hair and looked at me in a relaxed way. "Natalie hasn't arrived yet?" he asked as he placed his keys on the table. "It should be a while yet," I replied, continuing to move the vegetables on the counter. He came closer, leaning over slightly to see what I was doing. "Can I help you with something?" I stopped for a moment and smiled, noticing the kindness in the question. "Yes, you can. Peel these potatoes for me." I took a small knife and handed it to him, who without hesitation pulled up a chair and began to peel them in the clumsy way of someone who doesn't do it often. I watched from the corner of my eye as he chopped the seasoning. The silence in the kitchen was filled only by the sound of the knife scraping the peels and Richard's rhythmic breathing. Suddenly, he let out a muffled laugh. "This is starting to sound like one of those movie scenes where two people cook dinner together." I laughed too, but I kept focused on what I was doing. "Yeah, but this is real life," I replied, trying to keep my tone relaxed. However, the atmosphere seemed different. Time passed slowly, as if each movement reminded me of the gearshift lessons that day. It was a strange sensation, but at the same time comfortable. After a few minutes, I finished cutting the ingredients and went to the stove to sauté the food. He stood up, dried his hands and leaned against the counter, watching me silently. "Do you like cooking?" he asked suddenly. I stopped for a moment and turned to him. "I like it," I replied calmly. He smiled at the corner of his mouth. The way he said those words made me stare at him for a few more seconds than necessary. A comfortable silence settled between us, and for a moment his hands wrapped around the curves of my happiness. The smell of food began to spread through the kitchen, while I felt a warmth from the proximity and a desire to be happy. But at the same time someone could arrive and I wouldn't have time to put away the bulky tool. Natalie had just knocked on the door just as I was putting the beast away, as if it were a signal to stop that work immediately. I started to smile and speak in a way that sounded like I was teaching him how to cook cassava on the stove. She arrived smelling the food that, honestly, was very tasty. I took the initiative to serve her, while Richard remained quiet, without saying a word. I nudged him to teach him good manners and maintain his composure. We had dinner normally, and Natalie wanted to go to bed to get a good night's sleep, because the next day she would start her waitressing job, and I would stay home the way I always did. But I didn't imagine that I would have so much time that day to experience something new and fun, which you will hear about in the next few moments. Saturday arrived, and she had just left for work around 6 o'clock. I started thinking about preparing something to watch, an action movie that was going to be on TV. Richard made some fresh orange juice while I prepared popcorn for him to eat. When I sat down on the couch, I noticed that some interesting scenes were playing on TV, as if they were inviting me to remember my Richard. He was thinking the same thing. Meanwhile, he knew the right path to happiness that was right by his side. His fingers walked slowly near his knee. I couldn't resist looking at the tool that was stored away. The necessary and ideal volume was ready to be used in an environment conducive to comfortable work. He looked at me in a way he had never looked at me before. There was no rush or anxiety, just a mutual feeling that something was happening there. And then, as if time had slowed down, he slowly raised his hand and lightly touched my cheek, moving away a strand of hair that the wind insisted on bringing to my face. My hands remained firmly on the tool that was out of the box. The work had just begun. With simple and skillful movements, the door that the tool would fit into was right in front. The fabric covering the hole had to be moved aside so he could work in a special way, as if a professional builder needed to do a job urgently, without even clearing the land completely. The grass on the land was short, because the day before, in the afternoon, I had already weeded it for the professional to work on. That job took a long time. As I got tired, I stopped to drink some water and then went back to finish it. At least 3 times, I only had that day to resolve that issue, and I felt that something was about to change. The next day, I woke up to have coffee, and Richard talked to me about leaving. I'm still thinking about whether I'm going or not. It's clear that he's not happy with Natalie and wants to experience something new in a different city. This extra job of hers is as a waitress, and it won't be long before she starts working again. In the meantime, I'm planning my trip with him. Did you like this story? So, leave a comment telling us what you thought, and, if you've experienced something similar, share it with us. Don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any new content. Here, we always bring life stories, reflections and real experiences, all with great sincerity. Thank you for watching until the end and for being part of this journey. See you in the next video.